Hello, everyone. Dr. Christine Smith back for a really awesome session for you guys today with two practitioners that I love speaking with, Kylene Terhune and Kate Vasquez, both of whom are incredibly knowledgeable about stress and the nervous system and how we handle emotions and gut health and how that affects our hormones and how emotions overall affect our health. So I'm going to go ahead and invite them on here. Wanted to discuss today, and we were just talking about the importance of how emotions affect you. Okay, hi Kylene.
Hi, back
Perfect.
together again.
I know. So I was just kind of introducing you guys to everybody and just talking about, how we were discussing like what we wanted to bring to everyone today and the importance of how emotions affect health and how it's kind of misunderstood sometimes. So I thought we could just kind of start by letting you guys introduce yourselves however you want, and then we can dive right in. So Kylene, why don't we just start with you?
Sure. My name is Kylene Terhune. I'm a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and NLP life coach. And the way I work all of this together in my business is I work as a sexual betrayal trauma recovery coach for women who are recovering from discovering that their husband has a hidden sex or pornography addiction. So about 70% of women that go through that discovery end up with PTSD symptoms. So there's a lot of trauma involved and a lot of healing required. And so that is sort of, I combine the physical, mental, emotional trauma, all of it together. So with my functional medicine background, I work on the body, but then with my trauma work, we do the emotions as well. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm excited.
Excellent. And I know you also kind of specialize specifically in working with women, but everything we're going to be talking about applies to anyone who's gone through that experience. So that can apply to everybody.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you. Kate, I would love
absolutely.
to hear.
I'm Kate Vasquez, functional medicine practitioner and nervous system regulation specialist. So I blend different elements, functional medicine, mindset. I even have been recently adding in human design because I love just working with men and women, but to really help identify the root causes of issues, because I realize, yes, it's important to work on gut, yes, it's important to work on hormones, but we have to look upstream. We have to look at our nervous system and also the mindset, because that's usually what's driving everything. And so, yeah, I take a more comprehensive approach. I look at different pieces, and actually what I've really come to discover that is, when it comes to healing, it's more than just the physical. It's more than, taking supplements, changing your diet, exercising. We also have to do the inner work. So yeah, I'm excited for our topic because emotions plays a huge role in that. A lot of us haven't learned how to process our emotions, and it's important because that does impact our health. And I think that is like the missing piece, definitely in Western medicine, but also can be missing in functional medicine as well. So I love that Kylene is adding that in the work that she does too, because we understand how important it is.
Absolutely. Thank you. And then, I know most people on my channel kind of already know the stuff that I address, but just in case this is playing anywhere else for you. So I'm Dr. Christine Smith. I am a functional medicine doc out of Colorado, and I essentially specialize in hidden injury recovery. And what that means for a lot of people is I kind of retrain people on what they view as an injury. And everything that Kylene and Kate just listed is essentially a form of injury biochemically to your system. So we'll kind of all be talking about our own view on how emotions affect your health. But for myself, people forget that going through an emotional trauma, like losing your home or losing a job or losing a loved one or getting injured or being diagnosed with a chronic illness, are all forms of emotional injury and actually dramatically affect your biochemistry, your gut health, your hormone health. And there's so many emotions that go with that, right? Everything I just listed, grief is like a huge component of that. So we're going to kind of dive into all this stuff, and then we'll kind of tack onto it from all of our different specialty angles, because I think this is a super important topic that gets skipped over a lot in health. Like, we have our traditional counseling system, which I'm a huge fan of. I think counselors are an invaluable asset to health, but people kind of, I don't know, there's like a weird stigma around it sometimes, needing emotional help or coaching. And so giving people a chance to acknowledge that, no, this is actually a component of your health. Like, I work in a triad, like chemical, physical, emotional, mental, however you want to list it. But all of those, like, you really can't get a balanced state of health without addressing all of them. So let's just kind of dive into how we each approach it. So we can kind of go in a circle, or anyone who wants to jump in, just jump in. But my first question is kind of like, why are emotions a part of what you address when working with health clients? And I know I kind of stated it in my own way, but I'd love to hear what you guys think about that.
Okay, we'll just keep the same order. Okay. So, well, I mean, to be super simple about it, it's an incredibly emotional experience for any individual that has a betrayal from a spouse. So when you are living with somebody that you think that you can trust and you think that you know who they are, and then you discover that they're living a different life and that they are not living in alignment with what you've agreed to, and all of these things, it is incredibly shocking. It is incredibly devastating. There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of grief. There's a lot of sadness. There's a lot of very valid, confusing, conflicting emotions, because at the same time, you're also processing this. This is with somebody that you very deeply love and care about. And so one of the interesting things with this is that it is with the person that you live with, right? It's not something that, is outside of your home. It's literally impacting the environment that you live in. And I'm sure, I know both of you talk about the nervous system a lot, but basically if your brain and your nervous system is perceiving danger, you're going to be in this super heightened, super active state constantly, and you're not going to be able to heal. And so I talk a lot about creating safety and stability as the foundation because of that. So we have to create an environment in the relationship and in your home where you can feel safe. And I can teach my clients how to do that with their nervous system and help them sort of create the safety so that they can actually begin to move forward and process the really complex, difficult emotions that come from betrayal. And then when they get to a place of stability, we can begin to address the actual root, like the insecurities, the fears, the emotions that have come up. A lot of times what I see is we all have previous experiences in trauma before this happens, and then this piles on, but it also exacerbates any unhealed wounds that were there before. And so once we have stability created as the foundation to move forward, then we can work on a subconscious level. And this is my favorite part. So we actually work with the brain and the body to deal with the emotions where they are stored in the body. And so we're able to do a lot of really cool stuff with subconscious reprogramming and brain rewiring and quantum time technique and all this awesome stuff, and actually release negative emotions, actually deal with like visual triggers that are recurring over and over in your mind, deal with the beliefs, the lies that you've created based on the negative experience that you've had. So very commonly with women experiencing these things, or anyone experiencing these, really is I'm unlovable, or I'm not good enough, or lies like that have been created from this experience or exacerbated by this experience. And so for me, if you mentioned counseling and therapy before, in this particular niche, it's like you can talk all you want, and a lot of that is going to be reiterating the same patterns, the same fears, the same insecurities. You might get a little bit of validation that your feelings are normal, but if you're not actually given tools and techniques to calm your nervous system and to actually release the belief and shift your thought patterns, you're going to be stuck in this. And that's going to be really dangerous, and it's going to show up later. And whether you stay with your partner or leave, if this is not resolved, it will show up later in your life.
That was beautifully said, and I'm so glad that you brought up like tools and techniques, right? Because I want to dive into those too, and I want to just zoom right over to Kate, because I think this goes perfectly into her realm, and then I'll talk about some of the physiology.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely, like, a lot of what you said is very synergistic with what I do with my clients as well, because I too recognize and just look at, okay, most of us are in a sympathetic fight or flight mode, and when it comes to healing physically and with our health, like, I experienced anxiety for over 20 years before I finally addressed it. But before I addressed it, I was working on healing my gut. I had a lot of constipation and digestive issues, gas and bloating. I also was experiencing migraines. I had like 6 to 8 a month. And so even though I went the functional medicine route, and like I mentioned before, I was eating really clean. I took out inflammatory foods. I was taking supplements. I was exercising, doing yoga and meditation. I healed my gut, but I found when I was under stress and experiencing anxiety, the constipation came back and I continued to have the migraines. And I'm like, well, I'm doing all the right things. Why am I not completely healed? And that was because I realized, I'm like, oh, I am in a sympathetic state. I'm just in that chronic fight or flight because I'm just constantly thinking about, what people are going to think of me, and just worried about, all the to-dos that I have to do for tomorrow, and make sure I do that, and make sure I do get this done. And I'm like, oh my gosh, and I should do that, and I have to do that. And oh my gosh, did I say the wrong thing? And, just constantly ruminating on things, just worried about things. And then afraid of failure, especially, I was afraid of failure before I became an entrepreneur and started my own business, but we all can relate to this. It's like there are things in our life where we're afraid to do things because we're afraid to fail. And it goes back to a lot of the limiting beliefs that Kylene was mentioning. And I discovered most of us have this belief, I'm not enough, I'm not worthy, or even I'm not loved. Some of us have one of those beliefs, some of us have 2 or 3 of those beliefs. I definitely had the belief I'm not worthy and I'm not good enough. I always felt I was loved, but those 2 beliefs were running my life, and it was affecting my physiology. Because what I realized is when we have these beliefs, what we're doing is we're focused on fear. And that was fear of being, rejected, fear of, not being seen, fear of not being recognized, fear, just so many things that we are worried about. And what it does, it affects our body physiologically. And I realized at that time, because I was in survival state, all my muscles were so tight and tense, which is why I was constantly getting the migraines. And of course, the muscles will get tight and tense in your digestive tract, and it slows down signals to your digestion. So that's when we'll have a lot of digestive issues, but women too. And I saw this commonly when I first started my practice, focused on balancing the hormones in women. They would feel great for a month or 2, and then they would email me and say, the PMS is back, or my period is late this month. And the first thing I would ask them is, did you have a lot of stress this past month? And 100% of the time, yes, I did. And that's because no one has taught them how to adapt to stress. And so that got me really thinking. I'm like, okay, if we're all in the stress, state, survival mode, we need to do something about it. We need to teach people how to adapt to stress. And yes, yoga, meditation, deep breathing, all that is great to help calm the body. But it's not just calming the body. We also have to calm down the mind. And that's where we go in, like Kylene does. I do the same thing, go into subconscious, identify those limiting beliefs, start rewiring that, because once we rewire that, that changes our physiology. And then that's when we can finally heal. So yeah, I agree. And unless we're still in that sympathetic state, until we get out into a parasympathetic state, which is our rest and relax state, that's when we're finally going to completely heal. So that's why it's really important. And actually, in my questionnaire that I have all my clients fill out, I'm asking them, what emotions are you experiencing? Because I've identified, okay, these emotions are associated with a sympathetic state. These emotions are identified with a parasympathetic state. So where are you living emotionally every single day? In fact, I have them run through an exercise. So, and this is something, if you're listening, that you can do on your own. Identify your emotional home, which is why I realized, about 5 years ago, my emotional home was anxiety, where I was constantly worried and just doubting myself. And so throughout the day, what you can do, set a timer on your phone for an hour. When that timer goes off, just tune in and see, what emotion are you feeling and experiencing? Write it down, and do that a couple times throughout the day, and do that for about 3-5 days, and tally up, what emotion are you experiencing the most often? Because that's your emotional home. And if you are experiencing anxiety, fear, frustration, worry, doubt, anger, resentment, to name a few, that means you're in you're in a sympathetic state, which is that fight or flight or survival mode. But if you're experiencing more often happiness and peace and gratitude, love and joy, that means you're in a parasympathetic state. You're more relaxed, you're more calm. So that's the key, that's the clue to tell, whether you are in that sympathetic fight or flight, whether you're going to create a lot of inflammation in your body and it's going to be hard to heal, or whether you're in that parasympathetic state, which makes it so much easier to heal.
Yep. Wow. I like could not agree with that more. That was wonderfully said. So I'm just gonna like bring a little bit of the physiology to it because we're talking about sympathetic, parasympathetic, and we're talking about inflammation. And I think a lot of people like know these things are connected, but sometimes we miss the how of how they're connected. And when we start to have that understanding, it makes it much more realistic for us to work with and understand like why we might have just received a diagnosis of like PTSD or ADD or something like that when it's not something we ever would have expected. So essentially, like let's just go through the cascade of what might happen to someone that can like land them in this spot, right? Because I like giving like real life examples. So let's just start with like a college student, right? College is really stressful, or even if you didn't go to college, like going out into the real world, that's stressful, right? Like we're dealing with a lot of realistic stressors. We're dealing with financial stressors. If you're in college, you're dealing with exams. If you're in a job, you're dealing with like projects and pressures, or if you're independently employed, you're dealing with those pressures. So just general life stress. And then let's now talk about our society and the fact that we're supposed to be able to respond to email inbox of like 2,000 emails every single day, along with like our 75 different texts, and then the three other people that like we take care of in our life, and then all the friends that are wanting to talk to us, even if it's like a good thing. It's like sometimes we're in a state where we can handle that, and sometimes we're not. And then let's say that you've just been dealing with some stress at work, and then let's say you've been dealing with some stress at home, and then let's say you get rear-ended at a red light, and you're like, okay, like all these things, they're not that big of a deal, but ugh, starting to add up and like wear on me a little bit. And then let's say you like accidentally have an environmental exposure because you are go on a work trip and you stay in a moldy hotel room for 2 weeks. And then all of a sudden you're like, why do I feel like crumb? And like, why am I depressed? And like, I can't be happy. And I just feel kind of like empty and ugh, like I'm bloated and I don't get it. And like, I was fine. And now I have like no energy. And it's just kind of like this cascade that goes downhill. And then you're like starting to have brain fog and you don't focus as well. And this is kind of what I explain to people. It's like we get this allostatic load in our life and our body can only handle so much. And then if you go home and you like find out that you had a betrayal of some kind from someone that you really trusted, then that's just like the gasoline on the fire, right? So now all of a sudden, like your health is kind of tanked. You're kind of stuck in this fight or flight state from like all these little stresses adding up. And what's happening biochemically in your system right now is with all those little stresses, like your adrenal glands are working to produce something called cortisol, which is your stress hormone, because this is how we adapt, right? Like our bodies are supposed to do this. But let's say that you're really tired and you're not getting good sleep because you are stressed out. Now your adrenals are working harder. To mitigate that tiredness, you're now pounding the coffee in the morning, which makes your adrenals work harder. And when you're producing all this cortisol, all of a sudden your sex hormones can't keep up because they share the same building blocks. So now you like have no appetite for intimacy or like connecting with other people, or you're feeling a little bit brain foggy because your sex hormones have a lot to do with your brain health as well. And so that's just like some of that. Now let's also address the fact that when you get super stressed out and you have this inflammatory response, it actually kind of activates your immune system, because your immune system is like on the alert for like, oh, do I need to heal something from the tiger that's chasing us? Or like, do I need to address something in the environment? And you kind of get upregulated. And then also when we get stressed, our gut and our tissues become a bit more permeable. So one, that makes your gut more prone to injury, because yes, your gut can get injured. And two, it also makes your ligaments and your tissues more prone to injury. So let's say you go to the gym and all of a sudden you like tweak your shoulder now too, and you're like, God, it's just everything at once. Like, how does this happen? Well, it's because your body is in like a weird biochemical state. And when all these things start adding up, now your perception is also shifting, where you're like, universe, are you like out to get me or something? Like, what's going on? And then you start to have this perception and focusing on all of the bad things that are happening. And it starts to literally like reprogram and rewire your brain. And this can happen over the course of like a couple weeks, a couple months, a couple years, a couple decades. And this is how people can just get stuck in this state, because literally that's how you perceive your reality. And the brain is a weird thing. Perception of reality is completely unique and individual, which is why two people can go through the exact same experience and one person can experience PTSD and the other person doesn't. And it's all about how they perceive the experience, which is why, like the stuff Kylene was talking about, like someone might experience that differently based on their belief system versus another person, or the stuff that Kate was talking about. Like someone, I mean, sometimes people can't even identify their emotions, right? And that's a really tricky thing, especially depending on like your early life experiences. And if you were taught to just like repress your emotions, like, I'm going to be honest, that's like a lot of men in our society, because they live with a poor double standard of like they're not allowed to feel emotions when actually they're humans and it's really important for their health.
Yeah.
So men, I'm just going to give you like the pass that it's okay to feel your emotions and it's actually really important. But yeah, essentially, like there's a really cool tool called the emotion wheel. You can just Google it. If you have a hard time identifying your emotions, that's a great place to start, because you're like, oh, I didn't think of this word. I didn't think that I felt like unappreciated, or one of the other ones that Kate listed, right? It's like we don't always have that vocabulary. And then when you start to have the vocabulary, you can work with these things. And when you start to have the vocabulary and you start to shift your perception, then your hormonal cascades and your biochemistry changes and your inflammation starts to go down, and your body exits the sympathetic state that Kate was talking about, which is also known as a catabolic state. It is a breakdown state. Your body is breaking things down in order to fuel you to handle life. But if we're in a breakdown state for decades, no wonder your organs start to break down. So when we can shift our perception or shift our body state or use some of the tools they were talking about to come back into a parasympathetic or a rest and digest state, or a state where we're like, you know, the universe isn't out to get me. Sometimes crazy stuff just happens. And now I understand that like I had weird biology going on. So it wasn't just like a whole bunch of random events. It's that they're all usually a little bit interconnected. And now I can focus on nourishing myself and using certain tools to do that, so my body can enter an anabolic state, which is a building state. And this is why the state of your nervous system and the state of your emotions is pertinent to your health, because your body cannot repair if you are repressing stressful emotions and you're stuck in a fight or flight state. So there's my little spiel, but I think you guys stated it wonderfully. And do you guys have any thoughts you want to add before I kind of go to our next question?
Yeah, the only thing I was thinking is, as you were talking about the perceived reality, it's such an important thing to understand that we base this on experiences that we've had in life, and that's kind of registered in our subconscious mind. And then once the filter is set for a specific experience or a specific emotion or a specific sensation or feeling in your nervous system, we go through life with that filter set. And the thing to really understand about that is exactly what you were talking about, is we essentially pull proof of that moving forward. So what's really cool about doing the subconscious work is resetting the filter. Because if you are going through life pulling proof, let's just say, a silly one of like, everybody hates me, right? Well, we know everybody doesn't hate you, right? But like we can feel that way, right? And if that's the filter that's set, we're going to be looking for proof that that's true. Well, this person didn't text me back, or this person didn't reply, or this person didn't, support me in this way, or whatever, right?
You see more of what you see.
Yeah, it's very going to prove. Yeah. And so it's like, if we're kind of consciously aware a little bit that maybe isn't reality, maybe there's like 20 other reasons that person didn't text you back. Maybe their kid picked up the phone and they didn't see the text, right? Like there's so many different reasons, right? So resetting that filter is exactly the subconscious work, going in and figuring out, okay, where did that come from? Where was that filter and that belief established? How was that created in our body? At what point was that created, and why? Because there's a valid reason that it's there. And then we can go in and process the emotions and process the pain and process the trauma and consciously reset to a more realistic filter, so that we can now move on looking at things that come with more of a present state lens instead of viewing it through our past.
Absolutely. I call it like the power of perception. And that's one thing that made the biggest difference for me, is to be able to see things from a different perspective. So when I'm experiencing one of those emotions in that fight or flight survival state, just really taking a step back, because what we tend to get, or what we tend to do, is get so zoomed in on what's going on in our life, that if we just take a step back, zoom out a little bit, like Eileen said, there's so many perceptions out there, but we're so focused on the one possible thing, and usually it's the worst case scenario that we're focused on. And because again, our bodies were built to protect us. Its main goal is to protect us. And that's why most of us are living in that survival state, because we think everything's happening to us, but in reality, everything's happening for us. So right there's a perspective shift. So instead of saying, oh, everything's happening to me, why is this happening to me? You know, it's so important to like understand like the quality of questions we ask in our life, because the questions we ask is what we're going to get. And so if we keep saying, why is this happening to me? Of course, we now go into what's called a victim mentality. So we can shift the perspective by just saying, okay, instead of life is happening to me, life is happening for me. And instead of why is this happening, like, what is the lesson in this? That was one of the biggest things that I started asking, was shifting the question to, why is this happening to me? Like, to what can I learn from this? What is the lesson in everything that's happening? Because yeah, we're going to go through life and we're going to experience things that are not comfortable, and it's going to challenge us, and it's not going to be what we want or we expect, but it's always what we need. Because if we can see the beauty and the gift in what's happening in our life and learn the lesson, it actually helps us to get stronger. And it can help us to move out of that sympathetic state back into that parasympathetic state. So yeah, power perception is everything, to be able to shift the perspective with things that are happening with us. But also what I teach my clients too is like, you know, we have family members and spouses and, you know, other people in our life that trigger us. And that's like exactly what Kylie was saying. Everybody has their own perceptions and beliefs and patterns and conditioning, and we're all seeing the world based off, you know, like how we think the world should be. But other people in our life, even the people that we love, that we're close to, are seeing things in a completely different, from a different lens. So when someone like triggers us, again, take that step back and start to see things from their perspective, which was really powerful for me, because instead of reacting, going into that survival state, being stressed out, you know, and I would do this a lot with my husband. I'm like, okay, take a step back. Okay, what is he seeing? And why is he saying that? Why is he, you know, acting in that way? And it really helped me to shift and to calm my state, and then be able to respond in a calm way. So I went from like having a lot of arguments with my husband to now we can actually have conversations, because if he says something, instead of being triggered, I'm like, I didn't understand that. Can you say it in a different way, or explain to me why you're doing this, you know? And that makes such a huge difference. So yeah, it's like, it's so important, because the way we interact and react or respond with others, it really does affect our health. And this is the level that we're not, you know, looking at and recognizing how it's impacting us. And so yeah, when you're going to see your doctor and, you know, are experiencing certain issues in your body, it's, like I said, it's so much deeper than that. It goes to, yeah, the interactions that we have, how we are reacting, responding to our environment, but also how we're reacting, responding to others, and being able to, yeah, see things from a different perspective can, yeah, just really change things for us and help us to move back into that calmer state.
Absolutely. And, you know, I've just been watching kind of some of the comments come in, and someone said like this is referred to as emotional intelligence. Yep. Yeah. If you want to Google it more, you can totally look that up. One of the other things that you were saying, it's like, I loved you're changing your statement to like, why is this happening to me, to what can I learn from it? So one of the things that I think people get stuck in, and it's like, it's kind of an evolutionary response, right? Like when something dramatic happens, you go into the defense. Now, part of that emotional intelligence is being able to realize that like your life is not immediately in danger when like someone's mad at you. Like you're okay.
It
Now,
feels like it, right?
but it feels like it, right? But we can acknowledge and being like, okay, you know, like in most scenarios, like I'm okay. And so when we can suddenly start to shift that to that other statement of like, what is this trying to teach me? You just took your power back instead of giving it away. So if you're in the place of viewing the universe as attacking you, you just became a victim. You just gave up all of your power. You put yourself in a position where you were completely helpless.
You do that. You feel very weak when you do that.
Yeah, this is the equivalent of like the lion has its jaws around your neck, right? Like your body goes into a freeze state. All of your body autonomic functions essentially stop working well. And now your body literally is physically incapable of healing. And this can go for like any scenario where you feel helpless. And that is why it can be such a challenging thing. And some situations are, you know, outliers and very, very difficult. And I just want to acknowledge those. But a lot of them are more our perception of them. And so, and actually, there's a scientific study that showed that when people view something as a problem, their immune function decreases. And I want to clarify this because someone got confused on another call. I'm not necessarily talking about like if your immune activity is increased or decreased. I'm talking about how optimally it's functioning. So this goes around stuff with like autoimmune too, right? Because autoimmune is insanely related to emotions. Go for it.
Maybe this is what you're talking about, but I just listened to like a Joe Dispenza talk where he was on a podcast and he was talking about this, where it was the secretory IgA, which is your immune system in your gut, and how meditation with it was just a short period of time increased that in a healthy way, and not overactivating the immune system, but actually bringing it into a healthy place to support the body. And I was like, oh, it's just crazy, right? It's like just in your mind, like they're not eating differently, they're not doing anything differently, they're just meditating, and it impacted your nervous system, and it impacted your immune system. Like that's awesome.
Yep. 100%. So I think it was like, yeah, if you meditate 10 minutes a day for like 4 days, it increases your immune function 50%. And then the rest of that perception thing is the rest of that study showed that if you perceive something as a challenge instead of a problem, it actually increases your immune function. So yeah, that stuff I just find fascinating.
Yeah,
I love that.
I love his
so
work because
cool.
the beauty about Dr. Joe Dispenza is that he does a lot of testing of our biomarkers. So when people go to his events, he's now collecting like poop samples and urine and tears, and he wants to even collect breast milk, which I think is phenomenal because we need more studies with women, you know, who are pregnant, but just like the physiological change of what happens before and after the event is just, it's mind blowing. I've been to his event, just seeing the studies, the research, and they're going to be publishing the papers, but it's so true, like how powerful our mind is and how it impacts our body. And that's the biggest takeaway I hope you guys are taking from our conversation today, because yeah, we have a choice. We have it. And this is one thing that I learned, like in my life and my journey, we all have a choice at every single moment. We can either continue to suffer, which is just going to put us in that survival state, or we can choose to live in a beautiful state, choose to live, you know, with happiness and peace and joy in our life. And it starts with doing the work within, because what I realized was I was seeking that outside of myself. You know, we always say like, I'll be happy when I get that relationship. I'll be happy when I get that job. I'll be happy. I used to look forward to vacation because I knew when I was on vacation, that's when I felt at peace, because my mind wasn't constantly thinking about work and all the stuff I had to do. And then I'm like, I realized, I'm like, why do I have to keep waiting for vacation in order to feel peace? Like, why can't I just feel that now? And I get it. It's a practice, because again, we've been so conditioned to focus on things outside of us, to focus on, yeah, the fears and everything that's happening in our life. So the work that we do, it doesn't happen overnight, that rewiring the brain, reconditioning the body, but when you do it over and over and over again, you can get to a place where, yeah, you feel that happiness, you feel that peace, you feel that love. You don't need to, you know, anything outside of you in order to experience it. And you can experience it with chaos happening all around you, because you're able to respond in a different way. And because of that, you have your health at the same time. So
there's this one quote that I love, and it's basically like enlightenment is not finding peace sitting alone on top of a mountain. It's finding peace within the storm. And so that's a lot of what we're talking about. And just, I think teaching people about this stuff and bringing this up and making them aware of it is how we create emotional intelligence, because sometimes people haven't even had these conversations before. And I don't know, there's so many things attached to this when it comes to health. And I think one of the challenging pieces of this, and I'm just going to like acknowledge this, is like, we are challenging you to take responsibility for playing a role in your health by possibly overreacting to situations, and recognizing that that's something that you have to kind of review in yourself. And like, I think we've all been guilty of it at different times in our life. And there's this sense of protection that we're doing where we're like protecting ourselves and validating ourselves. But a lot of that comes from protecting our ego and validating our ego rather than protecting our body. And when we're trying to protect our body, we realize that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is to forgive a situation. And forgiveness isn't always for the other person, it's actually for you. And so, and it doesn't always involve like condoning what they did is okay. It's just choosing to no longer carry it with you as something that must color everything you do. And so that's kind of the next question I wanted to jump into anyway, is like, what are some of the most powerful emotions for health versus some of the most taking emotions for health? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I love this question. So, I think all emotions are healthy in a way, right? Like even anger is an important,
have purpose.
Yeah, they all have a purpose, right? And so underneath anger, once we get through that, maybe we're going to feel grief and sadness, right? But we have to move through that in order to begin processing the rest of them. So there's no emotion that's inherently bad. When it becomes negative, however, is when you don't do the moving through, you don't do the processing, and then it gets stuck in the body and then it grows. So a great example of this would be anger that is held over such a long period of time that it turns into bitterness. And bitterness is just one of those emotions. And the Bible even talks about this stuff where it's like, crushing your spirit, and it's really unhealthy for you. And over time, or a crushed spirit will dry up the bones, or something like that is the verse. And so it's like a really good example of how these negative emotions that are unprocessed and not let go, and in fact it's almost the opposite, we'll hold on to them, right? And there's a reason we sometimes will hold on to them, because they are serving us in some way, right? They're giving us some sort of benefit, and it may not feel like that. It might take some digging to kind of figure that out, but there's always a reason that they are there. And if we're not willing to let them go, there's a reason we're not willing to do that, right? So that takes a lot of self-reflection to kind of figure out, why might we be holding on to something that is actually hurting us, and are we ready to move through it? So I think that one of the worst is when we have these chronic emotions that we refuse to let go of. And one of those, just as an example, is bitterness. I think it's going to destroy your body over time. And then of course the opposite, the flip of that, is everything that we were talking about. And I think probably one of the highest emotions we can feel is love. And that's going to encompass so many things, right? That's going to allow us to forgive. It's going to allow us to feel grounded. It's going to allow us to see the other perspective. The emotion of love is such an all-encompassing, healing emotion. It's almost, I would say it's on the spiritual level, because God is love. And so I think it really takes it there. And so I think that's probably one of the absolute best for our health, if we can actually learn how to experience that and feel it and live it.
So good.
Absolutely.
And I definitely want to expand on that. I agree with everything that you're saying. Yeah, all the emotions, like you said, do serve a purpose, and it's okay. First off, I want to say it's okay to feel, anger when it comes up. It's okay to feel the guilt or the shame or the sadness, whatever it is. It's really important. And I realized, like, when I was younger, I didn't allow myself to feel those things, because when I was little, I was taught, like, you shouldn't feel that way. And so I would suppress that. I didn't want my parents to know, like, I felt like anger or guilt or shame, so I would suppress those emotions. And yeah, those emotions do get trapped in our body. In fact, there's different sources out there, but it's like, I used to feel a lot of tension in my neck, shoulder, and upper back, which triggered the migraine. And a lot of emotions associated with like neck pain is fear. And of course, I had a lot of fear. And same with like if you are holding on to anger, that actually gets blocked in your liver. So people have a lot of liver and detoxification problems. So yeah, I do believe if we're holding on to certain emotions, they can get lodged into certain areas in our body, and it affects our physiology, and which in turn creates those imbalances, affects our health. So yeah, it is important if you feel a certain emotion to process and release. And the best way to do, like if you feel like crying, go, if you're around people, excuse yourself, go cry, and it's okay. Actually, a friend of mine told me the other day, she's like, she's currently going through like grief because she's going through a divorce, so she's going through grief, and she's just processing a lot of that and a lot of sadness. And she's like, I allow myself to cry, because she didn't want to cry before, because she thought when she started she wasn't going to stop. But she's like, no, it did stop, and it felt so good, because when you cry and you process, you're moving that energy. Emotions is energy in motion. They're supposed to move. So if we allow them to move through our body, if you need to cry, or if you need to go like, yell or do something like movement, dance it out, shake it out, whatever it is, move your body, allow it to process and release. It's really good for us, because yeah, I agree. The key is to not hold on to them, not suppress them, and not, feel them. And that's what this unfortunate society has taught us, is like, you're not supposed to show your emotions. But I think there's strength in that, And so, so yeah, I do believe like one of some of the emotions that are not good to hold on to is anger, resentment, or even guilt and shame. In fact, I love this book by David Hawkins. I will warn you, it can be over your head, especially if you aren't familiar with like energy and Dr. Joe Dispenza's work. But I love this little, I guess, a little chart with the different emotions in this book. And he just basically outlines like the lowest vibrating emotion is shame. It vibrates at 30 hertz, which is very, very low. And Kylene, what she was saying, love is a frequency of 500 hertz. So in this chart, guilt, shame, that's 30 hertz. Anger is about 150 hertz. Love is at 500. So when you're in those I call them lower vibrating states, that's when you're in that sympathetic state. But once you hit courage and above, now you're shifting into that parasympathetic state. Love's at 500, peace is at 600. So for me, I have all my clients focus on not just love, but also gratitude. So that's why developing a gratitude practice is really, really helpful, and has been really helpful for me. And I used to keep a little gratitude journal, but what I found was that in the morning I would write like 10 things I'm grateful for and why, and then boom, I was done. And then I'd forget about gratitude the rest of the day. So now what I'm doing is I'm priming myself throughout my day to focus on something I'm grateful for, because I want to keep my energy up. I want to keep the frequency elevated throughout the day, not just one specific moment in time. Because yeah, we're going to experience a range of emotions throughout the day. We're going to, maybe wake up and feel great. Something happens. Oh, now we go down into fear and worry. But the key is to be able to process, release, and shift and move us back up. It's normal to experience the fluctuation of our emotions. And so if we can do little things to focus on love, focus on gratitude throughout the day, it's going to help keep our emotions up, and keep us in that high vibrating state, in that parasympathetic state. So yeah, gratitude is one of my favorite emotions, in addition with love, to really, really focus on to keep us in that high vibrating state, that parasympathetic state where we can really, really heal. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that. Thank you guys. So I want to bring up a point that addresses, I think, a number of people, where it's like people who can't cry. Like, it's just like they can't do it. Or like myself, for a long, long time in my life, I could not feel anger. Like I just didn't know how.
Yes.
And that was a safety mechanism for me as a kid, right? And so it's interesting for those populations. And I have a number of these patients where it's like, you know, and this goes back to the perception thing. Like I have some people that have been through events that definitely qualify as like traumatic, horribly traumatic events that like, you know, a lot of people haven't gone through. But they're like, no, I don't have PTSD. And so like that's just how they perceive it. But at the same time, sometimes it's not acknowledging the intensity of what you've been through because it's a protective mechanism.
Right.
So there's this process of like acknowledging it and then moving past it versus shoving it aside. Like those are two different things. And if you, or go ahead.
No, it's so important. I just think using the right terminology is like one of the first steps, and acknowledging that you know, something is abused or something is traumatic, like actually using those words can kind of allow your mind to begin processing the truth of your situation. Exactly for the reasons that you're saying, because I think in a lot of different instances, for whatever reason, it's very easy to say, oh no, I'm just going to deal with this, and this is not actually a big deal. And I think one of the reasons that happens is because we really want to compare to other people's situations. Well, my trauma wasn't as bad as their trauma, so mine can't be bad, right? And that's just not true.
Yeah. And, you know, and it's like, I understand not wanting to like feel disempowered by saying, you know, oh, like I have PTSD or something was traumatic. Like, that's fine. But you can acknowledge like this was an unreasonable situation that I went through and that was not okay. Like you can say it like that. That's fine. But when I come back to like not being able to feel your emotions, I wanted to address this because a lot of people don't realize that they like eat their feelings. And a lot of people turn to food instead of realizing that they're sad, or they might turn to TV or their phone or scrolling. And I think this is a huge thing that happened during lockdowns and different things, is like everyone turned to food and scrolling. Or some people, you know, they maybe exercised, which is a really great way of moving through something. You can also over exercise and over push your body. So it's all about doing things with balance. But like if you find yourself like, you know, just all of a sudden having like a huge weird craving for like some kind of food, check in with yourself and be like, am I feeling something weird like this? Is this an appropriate craving right now? Could this be coming from somewhere else? And like, I'll just give you an example. For me, like I have a tendency to crave chocolate when I feel lonely. And it took me a really long time to figure that out. And I can be lonely with someone sitting right next to me. And so sometimes it is figuring out like, well, where's this feeling of loneliness coming from? Is it something that I need that I'm not asking for because I'm not even aware that I need it? And this is how we start to develop emotional intelligence, is by asking ourselves these questions, not in like a critical way, but in a curious way of like, body, what do you need right now? Like what mind, like soul, what do you need right now? And this goes for everybody. Like this can apply to anybody. And so another thing that ties into that is if you have a tendency towards chronic pain. Pain is a way of our body trying to talk to us and to communicate with us and to get our attention and be like, I need you to pay attention to this. And sometimes it's not the area that's hurting. Sometimes it's something else. And the area that's hurting is just a way of our body calling our attention. And so like we were talking about different areas of the body that emotions are stored in. And, you know, these comes from different theories. This comes from like Eastern medicine. Some of it comes from people like Louise Hay, who's like a phenomenal practitioner who's written books about like how the body stores emotion. Oh, cool. There you go. Awesome. Yeah. So like one of those, a really classic one, is like low back pain can be associated with feeling a lack of support. And so if you're like, and like I'm a chiropractor, right?
Give us if we've ever experienced pain from holding on to emotions. Anybody? Anybody? Like we've all, this is a lived experience for us.
Yeah. And, you know, it's like, I'm a body worker, like I'm a chiropractor. I deal with back pain all the time. And like, if I am working on someone and doing all the things and I've run all the tests and I've done everything and it's still there, usually there's something else tied to it. And then that's when we dive a little bit deeper. And not everyone's ready to do that on like our first appointment. Sometimes I just need to be like, all right, like let's talk about the biomechanics. And that's where we start. And like we have to ease our way into these deeper levels of things and meet people where they're at. And you have to acknowledge that for yourself, right? Of like, okay, well, where am I at? But maybe I could get curious that like I might be holding on to resentment somewhere, and that might be tied to some of my health stuff because I feel stressed all the time,
Yeah.
even if I'm not willing to admit it yet.
Yes. And I will add to that that if we are aware of that and continue to ignore it, the body won't shut up. It will get louder.
Mm-hmm.
So the pain doesn't go away, or whatever symptom it is that's trying to express itself, if it's tied to emotions, and you try to suppress it. The more you try to suppress it, the more uncomfortable and difficult it will find a way to get out.
And I was going to say, I used to go to the chiropractor to relieve all the tension, the pressure in my neck and shoulder and upper back. And yeah, it felt great right after, but like within either, whether it's a few hours or even the next day, it was back. All the muscles were tight and tense again because, again, I was in that sympathetic survival state. I wasn't, coming face to face with the emotions I was experiencing, which a lot of it was around fear, which is why I had that tension there. And once I started to, really sit with it, like, what am I experiencing? And you mentioned the craving, the chocolate. I realized when I would push myself too much, so I would put too much, a lot of, going back to that belief, like I'm not enough, a lot of the time we feel like we're not doing enough. So we might say yes to a lot of people and overcommit and put a lot of stuff on our plate to do because we don't feel like we're doing enough, because we want to feel like we're enough. We want to feel worthy. And I realized when I would push myself too much and take on too many things, I would start to crave the chocolate and also feel it physically in my body too. But it finally came to a point, I'm like, if I'm going to the chiropractor to relieve it and it's temporary relief, I'm like, what can I do to relieve it myself? And that's when I started really doing the deeper inner work that started with the mind. And I would do that in meditation. I would sit into meditation, and with meditation, a lot of time people have this misconception. You have to sit still and like completely shut your mind off, like a Buddhist. But think about it. The Buddhists didn't get to that point. What they had to do was they had to fight with their mind. They had to fight with their body at the beginning. And that's what we have to do, because our bodies are so used to being on go and constantly being distracted and needing to do things. But when you sit in meditation, you start getting curious and like, why am I feeling this way? Noticing the sensations in your body, just like telling your body to just like, one, it's safe, it's okay, I'm safe, I'm okay. And then getting the body to relax. And the more like, those thoughts are going to come flooding in. Oh, I got to do this. Oh, I got to think about dinner. I'm hungry. Those thoughts are going to come. But then you say, no, we're going to sit here and we're going to get curious. And you just observe your thoughts. You start, and I would do the work. Like if I felt triggered, I'm like, okay, why am I triggered? Oh, because what they said, I felt like I wasn't enough. So that's why I'm feeling this way. But that's not the truth. And then started to see things from, like, for example, I got triggered by something my husband said, like, oh, you should do this, you should, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I got triggered because I'm like, oh, what he's saying was whatever I was doing wasn't going to be good enough. But when I sat in meditation, I realized, no, he wasn't saying that at all. He was just giving me advice because he loves me and he cares about me. And so I was able to calm my body down. But I use meditation as self-exploration. That's really what it is, to just get curious with my thoughts and how I'm feeling, physically in my body, and to be able to shift the perspective right then and there. And then once I get out of the meditation, like I feel so much better.
Absolutely. And I want to address two things as we start to like slowly wind down, and then I have a really great question to end with, I think. So one of them is like, I want to address why body work can be so beneficial when you're dealing with this stuff. And in chiropractic, and like one of the ways that, and it doesn't have to be chiropractic, it can be massage or acupuncture, whatever, just somebody actually working with your tissues, because we're talking about how emotions, which are energy and motion, right? Emotions are energy that gets stored in your tissues. And so this is why when you can have intense body work, sometimes you get emotional. And in chiropractic, or like one of the pieces that I study, which is like biogeometric integration, we talk about potential energy theory. So the idea is that potential energy gets stored in your body as an emotion, i.e. energy in motion. And then when you get body work or like an adjustment or something that releases that energy, it gets set free in your system again for you to get a second opportunity to integrate and experience. And so it's actually kind of a gift. And if you're finding that you're like continuing to go or like and just keep having the same pattern, like some of that can just be like structure and genetics and life, right? But some of that can also be because you're not processing something or you're not aware of it, and your body is repetitively giving you this opportunity to become aware of it. So that's why we wanted to do this, is we wanted to provide you enough education and knowledge that now you can start to be a little curious about it. And then when Kate was talking about being in meditation and like sitting down and having like every anxious thought in your life pop up, which is why most people don't like meditating, it's because you're fighting your own biochemistry. And you have to give yourself at least 2 weeks of like daily practice to start to shift out of that biochemistry. And it's about observing your thoughts and coming back and having that anxious thought. And like I've had meditations where I'm sitting there and I literally stand up and I start walking to go do something, and I'm like, no, go sit back down. And I literally physically have to like go sit back down. And it's just this practice of doing this until you start to literally retrain your chemistry, because that's what's happening. Your cells are learning a new way of being and existing. And in honoring learning how to do this, because we just talked about a whole bunch of the why and like what you should do, let's talk about how, which is the hardest part, as like our little wrap up here. So when we're talking about meditation, we're talking about feeling good emotions. And I'll go first so you guys can kind of ponder, since I'm surprising you with this question. But my question for you is, what does it feel like in your body when you are practicing the good emotions that shift your chemistry? So for me, like when I am sitting in meditation and I am trying to think about the life that I want to have and what I want to feel and what I want to experience, instead of letting all of my anxious thoughts come up, which they do, and I just say, okay, like, thanks, like, not right now. Like, it's like putting your phone on silent, right? You're like, all right, later, we'll address that later. I don't need to think about dinner. It's 9 o'clock in the morning. And yes, exactly. So for good emotions, I like to sit there and be like, oh, I am so relieved that I get to take this moment to not be pulled in 1900 directions. I am so grateful that my body is healing, and I want to reflect on all the things it has healed from, even if I'm in a state where it's not in its ideal state right now. And I want to feel supported by all the other humans on the planet, even if I feel completely alone in this moment, because some human somewhere made this mug and delivered it to the store and put it on the shelf, and some other human made my tea inside so that I could enjoy this tea. And all of a sudden, I'm now supported by like 100 other humans. And I want to thank the person that I got to talk to on the phone earlier this week, just for the conversation, the human connection that we got to have. And man, the warmth of that sun feels so good. And like, what an experience it is to be human and have this depth and recognize that my energy recycles in so many different ways, and that I am interconnected to everything. And like what peace I find in this moment right now. And my shoulders just dropped away from my ears, and my belly got softer, and my breathing got deeper and slower, and my heart kind of melted, and I feel like I just took off a backpack of weight. And that is like some of the stuff that I focus on. And I know that's really intangible for people. So that's why I wanted to ask this question. So I'd love to hear your guys' take, because it's different for everyone. You have to find what it is for you. It's just learning to focus on it.
Yeah, I think when it's not clicking, there's or there's an emotion that you're kind of trying to resist processing, there's sort of a resistance in the body and like a tension that you're going to be feeling, especially if you've become consciously aware of it. And I don't have any personal experience with this, but so then I think there becomes this internal resistance, like the anxiety grows and like the tension grows, right? But when everything clicks, and everything is being processed then for me, what I have experienced a couple times, it's just like the most amazing experience is that everything just feels totally aligned and grounded. And my nervous system feels totally safe and calm. And then from there, it's almost like this energetic bubble kind of coming out of like,
Expansion.
yes, expansion, protection, positive energy coming from me to the world, open to receiving positive. It's just it's very expansive is a great word. It's a very expansive and yet at the same time grounding sensation that feels really amazing. And, I have more work to do to make that happen every day or more.
It's a practice.
Right. Yeah. But there's been a couple times where, after a lot of subconscious reprogramming work and a lot of the emotional processing work is when I have experienced this primarily. And it's awesome. Oh my gosh, it's so good.
Oh, I love that so
Beautiful.
much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love to focus on the emotions I want to experience more, because that's part of the reconditioning process, because our bodies are so conditioned to be in survival. So the opposite of that, it's like, okay, well, for example, if I want to experience more peace in my life, I'm going to, just train my body. Like, what does peace feel like? And peace just like, yeah, just feels so like all my muscles are just completely relaxed, and my heart rate is slow, my breathing's slow, and it's just like, I'm just so present and looking around at everything, just grateful for everything that's happening in my life, And also, if I want to experience more love, for me, when I focus on love, I feel it right here in my heart. So I just feel, this pulsating in my chest that's coming and just radiating out. And not only am I feeling it within me, but I'm sending that out to my loved ones, to like my husband, to my family, to the people I'm working with, to everyone around me, to the world. And that's what, like one of the things that I really wanted to be embodiment is just like, or to cultivate more of just being this radiant being of love and light. And so I just basically focus on that when I'm in meditation. And, one of the biggest things is like, I also like whatever our goals are, especially when it comes to healing, like imagine, say 3 months from now, what do you want to feel like? Especially if it's like more energy or, just feeling lighter, like emotionally lighter, what would that feel like? And start envisioning what that would be, and getting descriptive, really focusing on all your senses. So just like like one of the things that I would also feel is just like this like tingling throughout my body, and then focusing on like, yeah, like feeling the sun, like you were explaining, feeling the warmth of the sun, or certain smells that smell good to you, things that are just going to, or that are healing for you. Focusing on your senses when you're in meditation is also a great way to like calm the body down. So yeah, there's different things that you can do when in meditation, but for me, I love to really focus on the emotion that I want to experience more of in my life. Because the more we do that, we're basically conditioning our body to feel that. And if you're having a hard time, say if you want to focus on love, think of a moment in time in your past where you experienced love, and then you can bring that feeling in and just focus on that feeling. And because again, that feeling that we're experiencing, those emotions, everything's already inside of us, except we try to seek it outside of us. But if we can bring that emotion in and just really just focus on feeling that every single day, you'll go throughout your day, and all of a sudden you may just like it just overcome with like love for like no reason. And it's beautiful when it happens, because you're just like, oh my gosh, I'm just feeling so much love right now. But also another thing that I shared with my clients recently is like we're doing this practice to cultivate more love, not just in meditation, but I told my clients, when you're driving down the road, start sending love to people, because another way to experience more love is to give love. And so now that we've been doing that for the last couple weeks, we're like, wow, like our driving experience is completely different. Because if you think about it, most of us hop in the car and we're instantly in a fight or flight mode as soon as we go from point A to point B, because now we're worried that someone's going to hit us or whatever, and make it on time in the stoplight, in the train or whatever. But if you hop in the car and you start driving, and every person you pass or person walks by, just send them so much love, you'll find that your experience, even in the car, is so much different. So look for those little moments, because at the end of the day, that's meditation too, believe it or not. You don't have to be sitting there with your eyes closed, but just being present, being mindful, and just really bringing in those emotions that you want to experience more in your life.
Absolutely. So well said. Oh, thank you, ladies. I know, like, man, I could talk to you for days, but I know you both have busy schedules and busy lives. So thanks for taking the time to do this. And, you know, we could easily talk more about this. If you guys have questions, like I just saw one, like, how can I learn to meditate? Please re-comment with that in the comments below this video when I post it, and we will happily answer stuff there. And anything that you guys bring up, like, we'll do another live. We love doing this. And like, we just do this for you so that you have education. If any of you guys want more information too, like I actually teach people how to meditate in a recorded course that I have. You can check it out if you want with the link in my bio. You just click my name, click the link in my bio, it takes you right there. Kate also has her own course all about like learning how to feel like enough in your life. And you can check that out by clicking her name and then the link in her bio. And then Kylene has a whole bunch of stuff she does as well around healing from betrayal and learning how to trust again. So we all have different resources for you, and depending on whatever you want to check out, like check out all three and just click the name, click the link in the bio. If anyone else wants to reach you ladies, where would you direct them other than that?
Yeah,
That's perfect.
Find me on
Okay.
Instagram. It's at the Kate VAZQUEZ Vasquez with double Z's, because it's commonly misspelled. But yeah, if you have any questions, send me a DM. Like I get questions all the time, people reaching out, especially if it's like anxiety related, stress related, whatever. Like reach out to me. Like I want to help support you in any way that I can. And that's where I'm most active. So yeah, send me a DM. I'd love to support.
Yeah, we're all always posting stuff. And then I have a ton of like interviews, podcasts like this on my Instagram. And I've done ones with Kate around hormones and with Kylene around gut health and stress before. So feel free to go back in my Dr. Christine Smith feed and you can see them. They'll have title pages, and that's a great place for free resources. So we just want you to be happy and healthy in your life. Thank you, ladies, so much for taking the time. And anyone with questions, I'll post this very shortly. It'll be recorded. Please comment below, and we'll do our best to watch the comments and answer them and get back to you. So hope you ladies have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll look forward to the next time we
Thank you so
get to
much,
chat.
Christy.
See you. Thank you.